Hi, crafties, and welcome to Weekend Crafting Adventures. I'm Kim, and I am on a paper crafting kick. After my last project of creating the 3D paper layered shadow box designs with the fairy lights, I have found that I really enjoy the paper crafting part of using my Cricut maker. So I decided that I wanted to keep on crafting with paper and try something a little different. This week, I've just completed making a beautiful wreath for our front door with flowers that I made using my Cricut maker. So lots of different color paper crafted flowers and accents that I put on a 18-inch craft foam wreath to make this beautiful project. So I'm going to share a little bit about the inspiration behind this project. Obviously, I had tons of fun, like I just said, making those shadow box project with the layered cardstock paper. And so I was kind of looking for something that was going to be for our home, and knowing that February is just around the corner, which I can't believe, I thought about doing some sort of February kind of festive with Valentine's Day in the background. So I wanted to highlight some reds and pinks and bright colors. And that is the inspiration behind this project. So in doing my research and trying to figure out who's done something that I can take some ideas and run with, I found a couple of different great resources. The first one that I came across was from doodlecraftblog.com. And she has a DIY decor paper flower wreath from Cricut that she created. And so I looked at the pictures and I was reading through her blog and I loved it. I thought it had some really great ideas. One of the things that I loved about it is that it incorporated a fabric wrap around the craft foam wreath to then put on the accents and flowers on top of that. And I kind of really just love the idea of starting the wreath with kind of that soft fabric background. And so I loved that idea. And then she actually had some pretty awesome paper crafted flowers that she then attached all over to her wreath. And going through the blog, I was super excited because she had all of these links to the flowers, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. Well, then as I'm clicking on these links that are supposed to bring you right to Cricut Design Space for those flower cut files, none of them seem to be working. And so I'm not sure if it was my user error or if maybe the link was older or something like that. So I went back and found a different resource on the internet to then see if I could find some paper flower images on Cricut that had already been put together. And sure enough, I found a link to the DIY Mommy, her cut file on Cricut Design Space, and it's fabulous. So she actually did a metal hoop Valentine's Day wreath using Cricut with lots of different paper flowers that she had on her wreath. And it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. So her link did work. And so that is awesome. So taking those two different ideas, I kind of put my wreath together based on those. I will make sure I put a full list of all of the materials that I use to do this beautiful paper flower wreath that I put together for February, and that have the beautiful colors of red and pink and all of these different colors, kind of with that Valentine's theme in the background. Anyway, I will have that full list on my blog post so you can see everything that I used. But I want to talk about my experience doing this project. This was such a fun project, and it's definitely a beginner-friendly project. The flowers were a little bit tricky at first. I'd never done paper flowers and creating all the different layers and putting them together. I haven't done that before. So that was a little bit tricky, but not too hard at all, and really satisfying and really enjoyable. So the first thing that I did for this project was I took my 18-inch craft foam wreath that I picked up at my local hobby store, craft store, and I wrapped it with fabric. And this was one of those ideas that I got from Doodlecraft blog when I was looking at her Valentine wreath that she was doing. I just really love that idea of starting the background with that fabric. So I cut my fabric into about 1.5-inch strips. And I did start out by using my hot glue gun. I will tell you that it's a pretty easy process wrapping those strips around the craft foam wreath. No problems at all, went really fast, but I had a bit of a glue gun meltdown, which was kind of frustrating in the moment because I was all ready to use the glue gun to attach that fabric and put the flowers together, and then attach everything to the wreath with the glue gun. So I kind of had to go for plan B, which ended up being that I used my Fabri-Tac adhesive glue. I was a little bit concerned as to whether or not it would work connecting the fabric to that craft foam and then also with the paper, and it did great. So that was a good substitution for my glue gun, which completely melted down and stopped working after I attached about the first strip of fabric to my wreath. So that was really fun getting that background. I used a bright red fabric with teeny tiny little hearts that went both directions. And so I didn't want to put too big of an emphasis on Valentine's Day, even though it is in the background and it is an inspiration for this wreath. I wanted to be able to keep it up for more than just February if I wanted to. So the hearts are pretty tiny, but they create enough of kind of a contrast with the red that it's a really nice background to the wreath. I then took some cotton yarn, and it's a really soft white yarn, and I wrapped that all around on top of that and just did a simple tied that off at the back of the wreath. And then I added a really pretty red and pink floral ribbon. So all of these things were going to be the background to my wreath that I then was going to attach all of my paper flowers to. And I really love how it turned out. It's kind of a fun, scrappy, rustic looking background wreath, which I really love. I feel like it goes well with our home decor, and I thought it would look great on our front door. After I had my background of my wreath all ready to go, I set that aside and then got into having my Cricut cut out the paper flowers, the cardstock paper flowers that I was going to attach to my wreath. So I took the Cricut Design Space link from the DIY Mommies. It's called the Valentine's Day Floral Hoop Wreath. And like I mentioned before, she actually has a Cricut Design Space link in her blog that I will post in my blog post. And that is the link that I used for all of my large paper flowers. So I decided I wanted to do two different sizes. I wanted to have some larger variety of red, pink, reds and pinks. All of that would be the larger flowers. And then the second thing that I did, which was fun, which was I found on Cricut Design Space some 3D rolled paper flowers, and these actually turned out not only beautiful but kind of a little bit smaller. And so I decided I was going to use those as accents around the wreath to the larger flowers that I was making that the DIY mommy has on her link. And what I'm going to try and do is put a link to my project that will have the little 3D rolled paper flower cut files, and they're beautiful. They are designed by Kat Madera. She has tons of different images up on Cricut Design Space. And what I did is I found all of her 3D rolled cut flower images and I put them on my canvas, and I believe I can save them all to a project and share them and that link with you on my blog post. So I'm going to work at doing that for this project. But anyways, I did two different kinds of flowers, the larger flowers and then the tiny 3D rolled ones that are then going to accent throughout the wreath. And uploading those designs were very simple because they all were located in Cricut Design Space already. Using the link from the DIY Mommy was very straightforward and simple. She also has some greenery, so some cut files in her project for some green leaves and a little bit of greenery, and I did add those also onto my wreath. So having Cricut cut out these flowers was very straightforward. The one thing I wanted to mention is that I chose a heavyweight cardstock, the 80-pound cardstock. I don't know if it's pound 80 LB. And I used that for all of my flowers. So with that in mind, I did, again, what I learned from my last project was to mirror my cardstock images. So the smooth side was going to be what showed. I did use a light grip mat to make sure that my paper peeled off, and I did change out my fine point blade because I'd done so much cutting for the layered paper project that I just finished. I really wanted to make sure I had crisp, clean cuts for these paper flowers. So I did go ahead and do that. And it made a huge difference. My cuts were clean. My paper flowers came off my mat beautifully. But I did also want to mention a couple other things about the cardstock. First of all, one of the things I read was that there's two different kinds of cardstocks. One has like a white core and one does not. For this project, I am using cardstock paper in the red and pink color family that does not have a white core. In reading about making the paper flowers, it was suggested to make sure you don't have that white core because that might show when you have completed your paper flowers. So that was really important. And then two tools that came in really handy with these paper flowers was a spatula weeding tool to remove all of the paper flowers off of my light grit mat, and a quilling tool. I have not used quilling tools before. I did purchase like a 5-pack of them and ended up using those quite a bit for both my larger paper flowers and for the smaller accent 3D roll flowers that I created. So making these paper flowers, once Cricut cut them all, I kind of had them in different piles. I had my group of 3D Cricut cut flowers that I was going to roll up in one area, and then each different kind of larger flower, I put those together and I varied the colors. So instead of doing all of the roses one color, I varied the colors so that when they were on the wreath, each of the different flowers would have different layer color of petals. That's my personal preference, and I really love how they came out. I will say that one of the things that took the longest in this project was shaping the flowers, shaping the paper flowers, and then attaching them together. Once I kind of got going with it, it went a little quicker, but at first, just learning the technique of using that quilling tool to roll the petals of the larger flowers and using kind of like that thin needle end of it to shape the petals took a little bit of getting used to. But after one or two, it really was enjoyable. It was not that hard, and the result is actually beautiful. These paper crafted flowers are gorgeous and so much fun to think about the different ways to put them together with the different colors. And one of my favorite parts about making the larger paper crafted flowers was that I decided to add a little bit of an accent to mine, and I took some old buttons that I had. I have a lot of just miscellaneous buttons for lots of different sewing and projects that I've done, and my wreath is all reds and whites and pinks, and I really wanted a little bit of a pop of color on the inside of some of those larger flowers. So I took some of my buttons that are black and white, polka dot or check or stripe, and I just glued them right into the center of the flowers, and I really love how those turned out. So that was really fun. As far as the tiny 3D rolled flowers, those were a little bit more tricky to get used to, still totally beginner friendly, but took a little bit more time to learn the technique. And the reason is that I had to use my little tweezers, that I had to really learn to grab the end of that flower and roll it up, and then once it was rolled, kind of let it go and glue the end to create that 3D flower. So that took a little more time than doing the larger flowers. But again, once I got going with one or two, the technique became a little more familiar, and I was able to figure out what worked best for me to get those flowers together. After I had put together all of my flowers and rolled up the little ones that were going to be the accent, I did use a little bit of green cardstock, a little bit of mossy green color, and then a bright green color, just to have a couple more accents that were not the red or the pink on my wreath. I really didn't use that many, but again, they were included in the Cricut project file from the DIY mommy. So I decided that I was just going to add some of those green accents here and there around the wreath. And I do feel like that created a little more of a contrast and highlighted those paper flowers that are all in pink and red really well. So once I had done all of those, completed, put together all of my flowers, I lined them up on my wreath and adjusted them to where I wanted to be before I glued it all together. I kind of did that and let it sit for a little while, walked away, went and did a couple of different things, and came back just to give myself a little bit of break from looking at it to make sure I liked the balance of the flowers, where I was going to glue them on. And then I went ahead and did the process of attaching all of my flowers and greenery to this fabric-based craft foam wreath, and it came out beautiful. I love the result. I am so excited to share it with you and to hang it on our front door. It really, really was a satisfying crafting project. So let me share my crafting keepers for this paper flower crafting project. I'm going to say the two tools that are definite crafting keepers. I've used one before, and that is the spatula tool, the spatula weeding tool. It really, really helped take my flowers off of my cutting mat carefully and without bending them. A couple of the little greenery pieces were really delicate and tiny, and really I did use that spatula tool for all of the flowers, whether they were the large ones or the little 3D rolled ones, and the greenery. So that for paper crafting is a huge keeper. The other one that I've never used before was the quilling tools. Those came in so handy, again, for both the large flowers that I not only shaped the little leaf petals with, but also rolled them with the quilling tool. And then again, the little kind of, for lack of a better word, tweezers that came with that pack to roll up those 3D cut flowers, because you roll them into these tiny little rolls before they expand into their cute 3D looking flower. So those two things are going to be my crafting keepers for this episode. My satisfaction rating. I'm going to give this project a 4.5. Really, I see myself doing lots of different wreaths, but the reason that this one got a 4.5 was because there was two little bumps in the road for me during this project. The first one was when I couldn't figure out how to get those cut files that were listed in Doodlecraft's blog to connect with my Cricut design space. I spent a little too much time, I think, on that. And the other thing was that I had a glue gun meltdown. My glue gun just stopped working. I think that would have been the ideal way to attach everything to this wreath, but I made do with my Fabri-Tac adhesive glue. It did a great job. So again, that's why it didn't get a 5, but overall, this is a really fun, beginner-friendly beautiful home decor crafting project. And I'm actually looking forward to taking this idea and using tons of different colors and different themes for all different seasons. I mean, just changing up the fabric background on the wreath with different cut files and colors of cardstock. Really, you could do a wreath for any occasion. So this was fun, and I will be doing many more in my future. I hope you have a great week, and until our next adventure, take care.
That's all for this episode of Weekend Crafting Adventures. Now go get that Cricut machine off the shelf and get crafty. For more information on this crafting project, interesting tips, tricks, and techniques, visit wcapodcast.com. Until next time, when we embark on another adventure.